Hello and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast, a podcast that is by the fans, for the fans, and focuses on the beautiful and sometimes not so beautiful game we all know as Scottish football. My name is Craig Telfer, and on this occasion I am joined by a son of a gun, a son of a preacher man, and a son of the rock. It's Fraser Clarke. Fraser, hello.
Hello, that was actually quite a good intro. I quite liked the drama, the way that built up. I felt like I knew where it was going, but I was excited to hear you say it.
You think that I have never done this before, but I've done loads of these podcasts before. So just coming up with fun introductions, it's good. I was with Sean McGuigan earlier today. We were filming an episode of A View from the Terrace, and we were just saying when it actually comes to creative introductions, we're probably going to run out at some point, and it's going to be like the Richard and Judy of the Terrace, something shite like that. So when he's not here, I'm working with you or someone else, it's a bit of respite for that. I mean, the well isn't dry just yet, so thank you very much for stepping up in his absence.
See, when you go with the Anton deck of Scottish football, I'll know that's
forget it.
Game's gone.
Game's gone. Game's gone. It's just you're just searching for political leaders and their horrible wives who swindled countries out of billions of pounds. That's once we exhaust that Wikipedia page is drained dry, then we're in bother. But we're not at that stage yet. We are, however, at the stage where we'll be focusing on the Scottish lower leagues. This is our patented 3-game podcast. We'll be looking at a fixture from the Championship, another from League One, and one more final fixture from League Two. You, the listener, will sit there and listen, and Fraser and I will talk at you. But before we get started, Fraser, how is everything?
I'm very well. I hate this time of year normally, and actually normally I'm on holiday this time of year. It's a wee bit later this year. But actually feeling relatively upbeat. So how are you?
Good, mate. Good. Listen, once you got your feet under the desk at that public sector job of yours, this time of year, you will absolutely love it. 4-week holidays, great stuff, mate. You've got all this to look forward to.
Having time off over Christmas. So we get effectively 2 weeks when the university shuts down over Christmas. I have never had time off over Christmas before. Amazing. I'm so excited.
I think there's people I've worked with who have moved into the university sector that say they can't quite believe the holidays you go off. I want to make it clear to the listener, you're working very hard the rest of the time. That has to be made clear. But nevertheless, it's really good to see that weekend between Christmas and New Year, that sort of that nether zone where time becomes a law unto itself. You don't know what day it is. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. I can't wait for that.
See, on the subject of working very hard, I can't say who it was, but what I can say this week, I had to chase one of Scotland's most prominent sports people via his mother.
Oh, Andy Murray?
I can't comment on who it was, but it wasn't Andy Murray.
All right. What's the other brother called? Jamie Murray?
No, he's already an on-grad, so somebody had to chase his mother last year. But for legal reasons, because this podcast is out before the embargoed news is released, somebody will be listening to this podcast, they'll then see the news and they'll think, that's funny, Fraser Clarke had to phone his mum because he wasn't replying to emails.
David Coulthard? Nope. Oh, we could be here all day listening vaguely famous Scottish people. That'll just be boring for the listener. Instead of listening vaguely famous Scottish people, let's list Scottish people that people have never heard of that play in the Scottish lower leagues instead. That's much more interesting. But we'll get to we'll drop down into the divisions very soon. We'll start off in the Championship, and I think it's fair to say we could have picked any of the 5 games from the Championship because there was something to like about all of them. But the match we will be focusing on is Ross County 3, Ayr United 3. Ethan Walker put the honest men ahead midway through the first half, but a Ronan Hale goal and a Jordan White brace put the home side into a seemingly unassailable lead. But this is Tony Docherty's Ross County we're discussing, and they're probably one of the most assailable sides in the entire division. Scott McMahon pulled one back, and then Curtis Main drew the visitors level, and it would end all square. County's miserable season continues with Queen's Park beating Raith Rovers. They've dropped into 9th place with 12 points. Ayr United are in 5th with 19 points. And I think it's fair to say it's getting quite tasty for that battle for the 2nd and 3rd promotion spots. But Fraser, give me your shoot thoughts on Ross County 3, Ayr United 3.
So remember a few weeks ago we spoke about Ross County on this podcast, and I went, they'll be fine because they'll just buy their way out of trouble in January. They've got a good manager. They'll be absolutely fine. See, at the end of this 8-9 minute highlights package, I started to wonder if Ross County are veering towards being Falkirk under Ray McKinnon, where they brought in a manager who you've gone, they'll be fine. They're a big club, they've got a big budget, they'll be absolutely fine. They'll just, their squad is got decent players in it. They can turn this around. And actually, after that, I looked at it and thought, they're in a lot of bother because that squad is bloated. It is full of guys who are maybe not pulling their weight. Well, actually, no, that's not even a controversial thing to say. There's guys in that squad who are not pulling their weight to the level that they should be. You look at their unused subs, like Nicky Clarke, James Scott, unused subs. You think there's something there that suggests to me that either Tony Docherty's gone in and not had a revitalising effect, or he's gone in and he's basically gone, these are the guys I kind of fancy, but I'm going to do some big work in January. And until then, it's just a matter of plodding through the weeks. And the ones who he doesn't fancy very much know that they're not fancied. So they feel, again, am I going to go back on what I said? I don't think they're going to get relegated. However, after watching that, I now wouldn't be as shocked if they spent the whole season embroiled in a relegation battle, or certainly a battle to avoid 9th place.
Very interesting comparison with Falkirk. That isn't something that crossed my mind at all, but the way you lay it out like that, there are parallels between the two sides. And what a time that was for not just for, but not for the whole of Scottish football. It really was. It was a golden period, and it's just a shame that Falkirk are doing so well at the moment. We'll probably never, sometimes probably in about 15, 20 years' time, we'll look back on that. Probably the way people look back on the Beatles and just think, wow, that was amazing. They'll think of the Martin Rennie years as amazing. But anyway, enough about that. We're talking about Ross County here. I think you're right. Yeah, there's a stink around the club. There's a real stink around the club, and it's a stink that hasn't gone away since Tony Docherty's come in. Very interesting, the comparisons between him and Don Cowie. You've obviously watched his post-match interview. What was the first thing that Tony Docherty said? Yeah, we're disappointed. And it's almost, you close your eyes, that's the exact sort of same thing that Don Cowie would say. But there's been no material upturn in form since Docherty's come in. That's 2 wins. The first of the season was under his watch, so that's a milestone of sorts. But 2 wins, 4 draws and 4 defeats. And I think in his post-match interview, Tony Docherty was doing a lot of spinning, like to try and spin the situation, talk about the team. They did so well without a lot of first team regulars for the first 60 minutes or so. They were excellent. David Mitchell being the best player of the park, really something to build on. And there might be some element in that. I mean, that's his take in the game. That's absolutely fair enough. He's a lot closer to it than we are. But it just doesn't seem consummate with reality. And I think the reality is more likely the one that you're discussing there. Players who are very low in confidence, players who are maybe a wee bit past their best and just went up there like for a bit of a payday. And you've got Ronan Hale, who is absolutely busting a gut up front and who probably, for his best interest, he goes elsewhere in January. So, not a great place at the moment.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking about. So, I mean, defensively is clearly where their issue is. So only Airdrie have conceded more goals in the league, and you can see why County have conceded so many in this game. And I actually thought it was quite funny, and I think it's Tony Docherty who's shouting. I assume it's him who's shouting. But before McMahon gets his goal back, he's just shouting, no cross, no cross, no cross. Like, the cross that comes in isn't even very good, but Jesus Christ, you can see why he didn't want a cross coming into the box, because it just causes total mayhem back there. So if you think this is a team that can't defend, despite the fact that, and I know they've got injuries at the moment, but despite the fact that they have a relatively, over the course of the season, or certainly the players who've featured for them over the course of the season, like a capable championship defence that's not turning up, you've then got, and I think I still stand by it, probably the best striker in the division. In fact, arguably one of the best players in the division. A guy who, if he goes and signs for a club who are challenging for the top 6 in the Premiership in January, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Up front, who scored a magnificent goal here.
Yeah, it's brilliant. The control to see the way he punched it forward with his head to bring it into his path, man. Brilliant stuff, and a great finish. See those kind of goals as well. See when the defender gets dumped in his arse, and it's Scott McMahon sort of just twisting himself in knots and keeling over before the space opens up for him to shoot.
It's that goal, because I didn't know the goal was coming, so I'm watching the highlights. I know he's scored, but I don't know where we are. And just when he took the touch, he knocks it down with his head, and it just almost like stops right in his foot. I'm like, that's a great touch. I really hope this ends up in a goal. And then the finish, just arrowing it into the bottom corner, is first class. They're not going to replace Ronan Hale with anyone who's as good as him. So even if they can go out and spend a bit of money in January and bring in somebody capable, they aren't going to be as good as the guy who presumably they will lose. And that leaves the defence in a mess, and a manager who is he already running out of ideas? I don't know if that's too harsh to say, but we also know with County that sometimes, Uncle Roy can act quite quickly, and if he feels like it's maybe not going the way it should be, then he'll just pull the trigger. And I wonder, I mean, let's say they don't win another game between now and January, which is very, very dramatic, certainly another league game. It's very dramatic to say, but looking at the fixtures they've got coming up, they're fairly favourable. If they don't win one of those games between now and January, will he still be there? I'm not 100% convinced he will, because this the whole vibes around County at the moment are just awful.
Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think what I can say to add to that. I think you're absolutely correct there. That the defending is really bad. You know, the defending for certainly the second and third goals, that the failure. There's a lot of players inside that penalty box. I know Tony Docherty's trying to spin it like that. It's a shot that goes through someone's legs, and yeah, there might be something in that, but that third goal from McMahon to ultimate, beg your pardon, from Curtis Main to tie the match. The defence is all over the place. Trevor Carson makes a great save, but no one else seems to react around him. It's Akil Wright that clears the ball off the line, eventually goes to Curtis Main, and he's almost winding up to take a shot, and no one gets out there to block him. And, you know, these are the things that when you look at these things in isolation, you just think, well, that's bad luck. But there's so many times that's happened with this Ross County side, just players just not doing basic things like getting out there and closing down the opposition. And when there's so many people not doing that, it does sound like there's a big sucking malaise at the club. And I just want to, you look through that team, and yes, they were low in numbers for this week's game. You look through the team, and there's so many players that have had good careers elsewhere, good careers where they've played to a high level, where they've won things. Their captain's a former Scotland international. Their captain helped Scotland get to the Euro 2020, was part of the team that defeated Serbia. Why are you not able to do this for Ross County? Why are so many good players not able to play well all at once? And that just, I don't know how you explain that. I think the point, and just one other thing, the point you said about presentable fixtures, I think if you can't beat like Queen's Park at home, you get turned quite easily by Queen's Park. You can't even, and there's no respect to Queen's Park, because Queen's Park have got some decent players in their ranks, but then you go to Arbroath, and the fact that Arbroath beat you 3-0, that's not like a shock. That's just like, that Ross County lost again. That's a damning indictment. I don't think there are any easy fixtures for them coming up. I think every fixture's a really difficult game.
You know, the thing that it feels like you maybe have to question to a degree then becomes the hunger. So Declan Gallagher is probably the perfect example, because when they made that signing, I thought, brilliant signing. He will be probably the best centre-half in the division. He's got all that experience. I mean, he's still probably a passable Premiership player, and he's gone there, and I mean, he's been dreadful since he went to the club, and he's gone there, and I wonder if he's just struggling a wee bit for the motivation. He's like, right, well, I've done this league. You know, I've done this league several times, and maybe the buzz just isn't there. And if he'd gone into a club maybe that was heading in the right direction, then he would have got carried along with it. But going in, the fact there's a general malaise around the place, then he's been dragged down with it, and then that's someone that the other players, certainly the younger players, but the more experienced players too, you'd look at Declan Gallagher and be like, right, we need you to step up and get us going, because, you know, everyone else is sinking, and it's just not happened for them at all. It feels like maybe there's, don't know if too many, but in key positions, key players just haven't really shown the hunger.
I don't think you can dispute that when the evidence is on the football pitch there. I was on the BBC Sports Scotland's daily football podcast earlier in the week with Ryan Flynn, who I really like working with, by the way. Ryan Flynn's class. But we were talking about Ross County and the result against there. And the podcast's quite quick fire, so you can't, you don't really get the opportunity to take a deep dive and stuff. But Ryan had said that he wonders if that County, you've been in the Premiership where you've been losing a lot of games. Suddenly the mentality of the team becomes, well, we need to win a lot of games, and that can be very difficult to do. But I was thinking that comment sort of stuck with me a wee bit. I was thinking about it on the days after, and I was just thinking, I'm not sure if that's the case. They've turned over their squad to quite a fair degree. It's a lot of guys that have come in there who, as you say, on paper should have that hunger and that expertise to win the division and win on a consistent basis. But that's just not been the case. It feels like they've tried to turn over so many things. The playing squad, they've turned over the manager. They turned over the manager and then brought in some new players when he came in. They brought in Callum Davidson as an assistant. John Robertson's still there to some capacity. So you effectively got three guys that have all managed at a very good level. It just seems confused and messy and expensive. And I struggle to see how it's how it can get better, unless there is just Tony Docherty needs to take them away paintballing or to Loch Lomond or somewhere for some a Duke or something like that. Something needs to click, but at the moment it feels really difficult to try and mitigate and to try and make it cohere.
Yeah, and they feel like a team that's been assembled by various people at various times without really any thought of how these players are going to fit in, if that makes sense. So they've signed players, you know, when you go to Football Manager, especially when you're playing it for the first time, and I remember this, like, the first few times that I got it, you're like, oh, a few names, like, I'll bring these guys in, and then you don't actually think, how are they going to fit in with the guys around them? So, like, you know, do I have enough pace in my defence? Do I have enough sort of dynamism in my midfield? Oh, but I've just signed these names. And, like, for me, the name signing, Gary Mackay-Steven, like, when they made that signing, I thought, not sure that, I mean, maybe he can do a job off the bench. Having watched the highlights and having read, you know, what's been said on Pine Bovril, Peterhead or Cove Rangers in January kind of feels like where his next move is going to be.
I remember going back to the summer looking at County's transfer business, and I think it was, we've said this a couple of times, but their direct comparison with St Johnstone, because they both came down after a number of years in the top flight together, and St Johnstone was like Regan Tumulty and Morgan Boys and Jack Baird, and thinking, well, that'll put butts in seats. That's the kind of players that are going to win you a championship and take you back into the top flight. And then you looked at County signings, and it was like Declan Gallagher and Ross Docherty. And thinking, yeah, these are good players. These players who have won the championship in the past. These were guys who had a good season with Dundee United. And then when they started bringing some of the older guys, like Gary Mackay-Steven, I remember thinking, when was the last time he was good? When he was it Celtic? Maybe if you really want to be like unkind about it. And then when they brought in Nicky Clarke, it just felt as though you're, what kind of team are you trying to build here? To use the Football Manager comparison you made, there's times where, I'm sure you've done the same, I'm sure people listening have done the same, where you sign players and you think you've got your team in place, but then other players become available, so you sign them as well, and the players that you no longer want, you stick them in the reserves, and that's them tucked away. You don't need to worry about it. But real life doesn't work like that. You're not just a name on the screen. You're not just a name on the screen with UNH on next to it. You know, these are people that need to be loved and coaxed into something. And that's the challenge that Tony Docherty's got. Remember, even when Don Cowie was in charge, you're thinking, you've signed too many players. Your squad's huge. You've got too many players, decent players as well, all in similar positions. How on earth do you fit them in? And they haven't managed to do that. And then they've tried playing players out of position, and that hasn't worked. So it's mind-bending how they find themselves in this position. And then the question, Fraser, probably goes above the manager's head in the squad building. It goes to someone like Stephen Ferguson, the chief executive. He's been getting a bit of flack for how the club are being run.
Did you see, on the subject of how they're run, the post on Pine Bovril about the fan who got the letter sent to him about joining the Staggies Army for the new season?
Yes, now I did see it, but it was signed by Tony Docherty, so the inference being was that this is something that's just been put together very recently.
Yes, however, it talks about looking ahead to the new season, despite being signed by Tony Docherty, who was not the manager when the season started, and it talks about all the great things that are going to happen this season. You see, completely ignoring the realities of how the season is actually going, even though those realities were already well known whenever it was written, which we'll never know because it isn't even dated. And just what and why? And it was a really interesting point that he made was, forgive any ignorance that might come across here in terms of political correctness, appropriate terminology, but I feel like Ross County as an entire club are increasingly coming across as a bit senile. Like, I don't understand how you can send... So they've obviously spent money mailing this sort of thing out to fans, and you've not updated the messaging to reflect the fact that it is no longer the start of the season. You're now kind of mired in a relegation battle, so it'd be like, you know, we need people in Dingwall or people in the kind of wider Highlands areas to get behind their team. Tony Docherty's, you know, trying to do great things. That's how you'd market it. But they've kind of ignored the fact that they're in a relegation battle, just updated Don Cowie's picture and name, and then fired it out anyway. Like, we'll go for the title this season.
We should not at Wraith Rovers, when Barry Robson was hired as manager, they basically just did they Photoshop something. They took his head and put it on, was it Ian Murray's body or Neil Collins's body? Was it something, am I right in remembering that?
That does ring a bell. I won't say it was Ian Murray's body as well, because it would be a bit weird to dismember the manager who literally left 5 minutes ago and replace him with your new manager.
No, was it not his Aberdeen signing picture? I think it was that. They took his Aberdeen signing picture and they replaced the head over. Oh, no, that was it. Sorry, they took the Aberdeen picture and they just changed the colours. That's what it was. That's what it was. That's absolutely nothing to do with what we're discussing here, but just something that popped into my head. And I suppose it's hard. It's quite unbelievable, Fraser, but we're a third of the way through the season, and Ross County have been overtaken by Queen's Park in 9th place. Where do you see them? Where do you see them going from here? I mean, is the playoff places unrealistic now?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the title's gone. Not hope in hell they're going to win the title. So, right, discount that. You look at Arbroath, who are, 9 points ahead of them. You think, right, that's probably at this stage in the season, certainly they're catchable. Dunfermline, I think, are only 7 or 8 points ahead of them. That, again, is catchable. And then it's quite a kind of close, compacted group. So you think, on paper, they should overtake Queen's Park. They should overtake Morton. Beyond that, depends who Raith get as their manager. Dunfermline look really good sometimes and then just have wild off days. I think that's just the sort of squad or the sort of team they are. Ayr, again, probably similar to Dunfermline, have their days where they look pretty good and then have their days where you're like, that's why you're not going to be challenging for the title. I'd love to see Arbroath keep it going. There's obviously that part of me that just goes, well, they'll run out of steam, or they're still one of the smaller clubs in the division. How proven are David Gold and Colin Hamilton at that level? All those wee things niggling away at me, despite the fact that on the park, by and large, they've been outstanding this season.
Yeah.
The County, if they really, really get their act together, can probably still get in the top 4. However, based on everything I've just said, I don't see it. I think mid-table obscurity is going to be as good as it gets unless they do some magical business in January and Tony Docherty maybe just gets a bit of momentum and gets 7 or 8 wins in the spin. That's what it's going to take now. Yeah,
I thought that after the win against Raith Rovers, so they were fairly fortunate to actually have won that. Tony Docherty spoke about the relief that gave them and where that could possibly take them. And the answer to that is it's not taking them anywhere. They're actually in a worse off position than they were after that. But we've spoken a lot about Ross County. What about Ayr United? I suppose the best thing to say about this was good fighting spirit to come back from 3-1 down. Scott Brown absolutely delighted with the team's never say die attitude, really liked his team's quality on the ball. What do you make of Ayr United showing in this?
It probably feels like a more positive result than it is because of the circumstances and because, going away to Dingwall, getting a point after being 3-1 down is something to celebrate. But they've drawn far too many games this season. So I think if you look at it on a statistical level, you're like, right, that's a 7th draw from 14. So although the circumstances, that's a good point because you were 3-1 down away from home. So take that performance on its whole and say, right, that's a good point. We'll be happy going down the road with that. But overall, to have drawn as many games as they have in a division that's as tight as this, you start to wonder if that's going to come back and haunt them come the end of the season, because I thought Ayr could challenge for the title for a bit and then they'd fall away and they'd sort of consolidate with a solid 3rd or 4th place. Looking at the table as it is and looking at aspects of this game and aspects of how they've been in recent games, you think, I'm still not 100% convinced by them. And I'm probably not, I'm definitely not 100% convinced by Scott Brown as a manager. And I feel like their fan base is kind of the same. They'll maybe get a few positive results and they're like, right, Brown knows what he's doing here. And then it'll be followed by a couple of negative results and people start getting on his back. And that's been the case for a year, probably longer than that. I remember it must be around about this time last year that they lost to East Kilbride.
I think so, yeah, that's right. I think he was on really shaky ground at that period because they were well beaten by East Kilbride, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and it feels like Scott Brown's Ayr United are always just 3 or 4 defeats away from him being in a kind of major position. And almost like Barry Robson, I felt like Barry Robson, as soon as he lost a couple of games, as soon as their form went off, fans would get sick, fed up of him, and then he'd probably leave. And that's kind of how I feel about Scott Brown. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he can turn it around. I mean, not that they need turning around in a dramatic sense, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he put together a good run. I'm just not convinced by him as a manager.
And I think there's a lot of all the managers in the SPFL, he's one that I still can't quite make up my mind of if he's very good or not, because there are positives about the game. I remember seeing him like this. You're going back to the start of last season, but it was a game against Stenhousemuir in the League Cup group stages where Frankie Musonda was an inverted left back. And I remember thinking, I have never seen players at this level do this. I was completely aghast, not in a good way, sorry, astounded by what I'd seen in front of me, just by how good they were. And it looked as though they had an extra man in the middle of the park just because of the tactics that he was deploying there. And I thought, this team looked really good. And even for just a low stakes kickabout against a part-time team from the division beneath you, there was a lot to like about Ayer's performance in it. It never quite materialised into anything tangible. There was the criticisms of Brown where chucking his goalkeepers out the team as soon as they made a mistake. I think he used 5 over the course of the last season. I think he's curbed that this time around. David Mitchell is firmly the number one goalkeeper. And a tendency to drop points or lose big games. I think that's the criticism against him. And they are capable of going on good runs, but at the same token, they're capable of going on not so good runs. I mean, at the moment, that's 2 points from the last 4 matches. I went to see them against Partick Thistle. I thought that they were good in the first half, poor in the second. A 0-0 draw against Queen's Park, who had Henry Fieldson sent off after 9 minutes. Like a huge advantage. You couldn't take it. And I mean, what I would say though, to be fair, in that game, Callum Ferry was absolutely incredible. Like an absolutely remarkable performance from the goalkeeper. We've kind of come to expect that from him in fits and starts. And to lose at Dunfermline courtesy of like a Barney Stewart flick. I still can't quite make up my mind about Ayr United. And if you told me they'd finish this season in second, I'd probably believe you. If you told me they finished the season in 6th, I'd probably believe you. I know that's a very general analysis of them, but I just think they're such a difficult and tricky team to try and pin down.
Remember Lee Bullen's Ayr United? Did they not end up finishing 2nd or 3rd or something like that? Despite
second.
The fact, nobody was that convinced they were that good at any stage. That's maybe how I feel about this Ayr team. And I think there was nothing in the league that season. I'm sure that their second place finish was by a point or 2 points or something. There was barely anything in it. But they were kind of unconvincing all season and then finished second. But Bullen wasn't particularly revered by the fans. He wasn't particularly well liked. His style of play wasn't great. And I suppose it's be careful what you wish for from an Ayr point of view, because they're still doing very well. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Ayr United were kind of mired in League One and then they got relegated from the Championship, I think once or twice, certainly in the last decade or so. So what they're doing by becoming an established top half Championship club is excellent, and that's really good. It just doesn't feel very inspiring.
I suppose there's just gentle progress from where they've been. But I suppose that gentle progress is one thing. But I'm going to assume spending a lot of money to do it, we want to see a little bit more than gentle progress. We want to see the team actually putting up a sustained title challenge. And that probably not going to happen this season. And it hasn't happened. I mean, he's only been there, this is his second full season at the club, certainly. So there's still time to see how it develops. It just feels like he's been given a lot of tools at his disposal and it's not quite cohered.
You know what I want to see from Ayr United? I want to see Dom Thomas.
Yeah, aye.
Obviously there must be a falling out, or there must be something like his face doesn't fit.
He doesn't run hard enough. That's the street talk.
Well, you've got a guy there who doesn't really need to run because he's such a magical footballer. So if you're looking for a bit of inspiration, and it's no exaggeration to say I think any other Championship club, and I include St Johnstone in that, would take Dom Thomas in their squad. And I think he probably starts for the majority, St Johnstone accepted, in given their sort of front three and the prowess they've got there. But an on-form Dom Thomas is one of the best players in the second tier. So I can't understand why. I mean, okay, if he's not running as hard as his teammates, that's fine. But if you need a goal, or if you're in a situation where you think, actually, we can get at this team a wee bit, you put on Dom Thomas, because he single-handedly ran Queen's Park for a spell. And if you need somebody with a bit of magic to create something out of nothing in this division, you're probably looking at Dom Thomas and Dylan Easton. Those are your two guys. Yeah,
I don't understand that, why you would sign Dom Thomas, to who everyone knows what he's good at and what he's perhaps his drawbacks are. But I mean, he's the kind of player whose positives far outweigh the negatives. Just stick him up front, out wide, and just feed him the ball, and things can happen. And you compensate for that by playing him elsewhere. You don't sign Dom Thomas and say, listen, if you don't hit 10k in your game, then you're not getting, we're not starting you. That's just daft, really. But that's But there's, I suppose, with the Ayr United side, there is plenty of razzmatazz I suppose guys like guys like Jamie Murphy. Jamie Murphy's having quite a good season, but he feels more like a functional winger than it's a bit more up and down, whereas Thomas, you just want to see him playing in the final third. So maybe I'd say Razmataz, but that's like I'm trying to think, that's like Robbie Williams to Brian McFadden in terms of comparisons, in terms of showman. I know who I'd much rather pay money to go and see. Anyway, up next, Fraser, Ayr United versus Arbroath.
I think it'll be a draw because Ayr United are involved. And I actually, before even looking at how many games Ayr had drawn this season, I looked at that fixture and went, yeah, I fancy that to be a draw.
Yeah, and Ross County versus Greenock Morton.
I mean, this is huge. The games County have coming up as well. Morton, Queen's Park at Lesser Hampden, Banks OD away, Airdrie at home, Wraith away, Arbroath at home to end the year. On paper, County should win. I don't think they can afford to lose at this point.
It's on paper. You look at it. I said, well, it's Ross County versus Greenock Morton. Dingwall's a difficult place to go. People don't like travelling up there. It's a long way to go, and you're perhaps out of kilter by the time you get there. Who cares? It's Ross County you're playing here. I think there's I think there'll be a lot of pressure in County. I think Dougie Emery will basically say to them, listen lads, go up there and enjoy yourselves. I think there's a lot of pressure on Ross County to win this. But Fraser, we had briefly mentioned Barry Robson and Wraith Rovers, and they parted ways on Tuesday following the defeat to Queen's Park. Wraith were beaten 2-1 at Lesser Hampden, 2 excellent goals from Josh Fowler. But I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this one. There's a good podcast on the Patreon where Craig Fowler and Andy Harrow talk about it in detail. But I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this one, because I think from the outsider, if you didn't have any idea of what's going on, you might just look at the league table and think, wow, that's unusual to be sacked when you're in that position. But the general consensus is that Rovers fans aren't too fussed that he's moving on.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised at all when I saw it. And I don't mean I was happy to see him lose his job, but every time I went in the Wraith thread, it just felt quite downbeat. Like, I think his style of play was quite miserable, pretty dull to watch. He seemed to nullify everything that was exciting about them. And, and they got results to a degree. Like, the results certainly weren't disgraceful, but there was maybe a real lack of fun when Barry Robson's Wraith Rovers were involved. And that it just seemed a bit stale. And that's not a good thing to say when you've been in position under a year. So I wasn't surprised at all. And the other thing that whenever I thought about Barry Robson, it was just his inability to make subs or change shape. And the fact he would rather, I know with Lewis Gibson obviously going out on loan, and Rovers fans were kind of like, we would maybe like to see more of him. But he's gone out on loan because he simply wouldn't fit the shape. You're like, well, maybe be a bit more adaptable, just be a bit more flexible. The
post-match interview after the Queen's Park game, when he talked about the number of penalty box entries, the number of crosses they put in, fans don't want to hear that. I can see the point that you're making, where the performance, if you think the performance is good, but the result doesn't match that, then you need to explain that. You lose 2-1 and you say, but look at all the good things we did. We were very much on the front foot. I can understand the saying that. Fans don't want to hear that, though. Unfortunately, fans don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear about penalty box entries when you've just been beaten off one of the worst sides of the division, who haven't won a home game all season. You pitch up there and get turned over by them. So just interesting to see where Robson will go next, because there's other than that good spell at the start of his time at Aberdeen, when he wasn't even the manager, he was the interim manager. Other than that, his Aberdeen side weren't particularly inspiring. Lost his job there. Wraith Rovers, I think fans could tolerate him, but lost his job there. Where does he go next?
I feel like he might be better suited to being an assistant manager or being a coach somewhere. Just, it felt like to be a manager, you don't necessarily have to be a good coach, but you do have to have certain qualities. Not everyone does, but a certain charisma about you, or something that, people skills. I'm not saying Barry Robson doesn't have social skills, but it didn't always come across that way in his post-match and things like that. Like, he couldn't relate to fans, and he comes across to me, and I don't know if it's the case at all, but referencing things like penalty box entries, like someone who's very analytical, maybe very intelligent, really, really interested in the kind of deep dives into the data of football, but maybe just doesn't get what fans want to hear, doesn't get the kind of, okay, you can turn up and watch your team win 1-0 and it'll be painfully, miserable to watch, but the data showed that we played in the right way. But fans want a wee bit more. They want someone to get behind. They want a bit of charisma. They just want a personality. And yeah, listen, if Barry Robson had won 14 games out of 14 this season. Nobody would care if he had charisma or personality, but when you don't, it just makes it a bit more difficult. So it feels like there's definitely a role in football for him, maybe just not in frontline management.
Now, certainly more time to listen to the High Achievement podcast while he ponders his next move. We will drop into League One, Fraser, and we'll take a look at the 2-2 draw between Stenhousemuir and Kelty Hearts at Oakle View. Rico Diak's double, which included a lovely free kick, put Kelty Hearts into a very deserved 2-goal lead, but a well-taken goal from Matty Aiken and a long-range thunderbolt from Scotty McGill pulled the Warriors level. Stenhousemuir have dropped into third place. They're on 23 points. Kelty have 8 points and they're still in ninth, but they've nudged a little bit further away from Cove Rangers in last place, and they've nudged a little bit closer to Montrose in 8th. Fraser, give me your shoot thoughts on Stenhousemuir 2, Kelty Hearts 2.
So I think this is the first time I've watched Stenhousemuir's highlights since they switched from pixel art to an actual man or woman with a camera, and I really enjoyed the position being quite low for many reasons. Firstly, because it made me feel like I was actually there, having sat in that exact bit of the sand where I did commentary a few years ago. But secondly, because you can hear everything. There's a bit very, very early in the highlights, I think it's Rico Diak, he kind of like lays the ball off and his teammate doesn't really move. He just roars, "Get on that fucking ball!" But like you can hear it word for word. And right throughout the game, you could just hear things like that, which I thoroughly enjoyed. This result, or certainly when I looked at it and saw Kelty were 2-0 up, I thought, oh, that's a surprise. And then when the Warriors obviously got 2 goals back, I mean, quite late on, I think it was after the 80th or 85th minute.
84 and 88.
Yeah, so I mean, late goals to rescue it. Must have felt like a bit of a kick in the teeth for Tam O'Ware, because that would have been a real confidence boosting result. Would they have deserved it? I thought Stenny maybe could have had a penalty or another penalty, but
my thoughts, I was at the game and I think it's the worst Stenhousemuir have played this season in that first half. I think Brown Ferguson spoke very well about it. The Stenhousemuir assistant manager just said they were well off their usual standards. Everything that Kelty did, that's what Stenhousemuir wanted to do. And what I mean by that is Kelty were super aggressive in that first half. I haven't watched the Stenhousemuir highlights because I don't trust them yet. I'll take your word for it. If they're good enough for Fraser Clarke, they'll be good enough for me. And it's good to see the club moving away from pixel art finally in the year of our Lord 2025. I watched Kelty Hearts' highlights. That chance that Craig Johnson has, the double save from Darren Jameson.
Brilliant double save.
That happened 20 seconds into the game, right? I'm not exaggeration. That was 20 seconds into the game, and we're all sitting looking at each other thinking, what the fuck is happening here? And I think the real Kelty were dominated, and Kelty were dominant in the middle of the park. And it was guys like Aaron Arnott and Alex Ferguson were really, really good, snapping right in on top of Mikey Anderson and right in on top of Scott McGill. And I think they saw that Kinley Billa might have been the weak spot down at left back, and they looked to exploit him. That's where the first goal comes from. That's where that chance, the Craig Johnson double chance, came from, coming down the left-hand side. And if it wasn't for Darren Jameson, who had an excellent game here, and Brown Ferguson was right to single him out for praise, it could have been a lot worse. But I think that the first half came at a very good time for Stenhousemuir, because there was a chance to get the boys in and give them a fucking rocket and tell them, you need to up the game. And I thought Stenhousemuir were a lot better in the second half. Yes, Kelty scored a really nice free kick from Rico Diak, and I think Joseph Teasdale should have scored. Greg Buchanan just malfunctioning when trying to carry the ball out from the back and allowing Teasdale to nick it off him, and another brilliant save from Jameson. But strangely, had this game gone on for another couple of minutes, Stenhousemuir would have won it. I think it's a team that's low in confidence when they got spooked with that first goal coming in, and then the second one coming bang bang. You've got a natural thing. Christ, we've gone from 3 points to 1 point. We need to sit and hold on to this. And I think had the game gone on a wee bit longer, Stenhousemuir might have won something, but it didn't. And I think that Tam O'Ware described it as sickening. I think he's absolutely correct, because Kelty were far and away the better side here.
How did Kelty look in terms of progression from if you'd seen them earlier in the season? Because obviously Michael Tidser being back as assistant manager, strange, like really weird goings on in terms of going from manager to manager Dunfermline to a player at Montrose to assistant manager to the guy who was your assistant, all inside a year.
It's been some year, yeah.
Was there anything that you could see in terms of the Kelty? I'm thinking of the Kelty last season, who at this time last year looked like a really, really good team.
Yeah, they were class. I mean, that was really because you had Michael Tidser in the middle of the park, someone who was just a really good player and someone who never really needed to leave the centre circle, because you can do all the fancy stuff, you can do all the setting the tempo, and you can give the legs to the younger boys to run up and down. I thought this was more in keeping with the Kelty Hearts that we have come to expect from them, where you've got two aggressive centre forwards. I think Craig Johnson is, and he's not the best striker on the planet, but he gives you a lot. You're a very enthusiastic, very competitive player, and a really good defensive forward, you'd describe him as. You've got Rico Dyack, who is a big laddie. I'm not sure if he's quite what Partick Thistle are looking for, but someone who really looked to noise up Greggy Buchanan and Archie Graham. Did it all afternoon till he went off. And actually, I think he had a knock. And I think him coming off actually affected the game, because they weren't quite as able to keep the ball up the other end of the park as well as they were doing beforehand. But as I say, in the middle of the park, Alex Ferguson, someone who was brilliant on a loan spell at East Fife from St Johnstone, never really quite kicked on from there. I think loan spells to like Stirling Albion and Queen of the South never worked out for him. Aaron Arnott was one of Bonnyrig's better players last season. I think the pair of them worked quite well in the middle of the park. And I think as well, having Jack Bryden and Craig Clay at centre-back, two proper defenders, that certainly helps. I think the issues that Kelty have had over the course of the season, they've just been absolutely snookered with injuries. Perhaps the worst out the entire division, where you're having to play younger guys who aren't quite ready for the rough and tumble of first-team football. You're having to give them a shot. Whereas now, I think this is the sort of team that Tam O'Ware would like to field, but they are still quite fragile, as you could see by the end of the game.
And as you could see by the result midweek as well, because
that's a stinker.
Losing to Hearts B, I wasn't expecting that. I looked at the stats from it, and it looks like Hearts B were, like 12 shots to 2, well on top.
What you would say with that, Fraser, though, if you look at the team from Saturday and the team on Tuesday, it was vastly different one to the other. So I'd maybe give O'Ware a wee bit of sympathy, a wee bit of a pass on that one.
Did you notice a new name or a returning name in goals for them? That I don't know if you signed it, I've not noticed anywhere, but Kyle Gourley was in goals for them midweek. Now, if they can get him back, he was pretty good during his last spell at Kelty
so
Hearts.
He was. Go and remind me Kyle Gourley's journey.
He had been at Cove Rangers, I think, before that, where he kind of had been him and Stuart McKenzie, and then before, I think was he a Dundee youth team player, and he had a load of loan spells, but he kind of found a home at Kelty Hearts. He must have did he replace Darren Jameson actually when he went to Kelty? I
think he might have done when Darren Jameson came to Stenhousemuir.
Yeah, and I just thought, wow, I was looking at the team lineups and I thought, Gourley, and then I looked down at K. Gourley, and I went, I wonder where he is. Shows that he doesn't have a club, and I thought, I don't know if he's signed or if he's on as a trialist or what the deal is, but I feel like if they can get him back, that's going to give them a huge boost, because they've conceded a lot of goals this season. I mean, they've conceded 27 goals this season, and I thought maybe for both goals on Saturday, Ryan Adamson might feel he could have done better. I don't know. I think the first goal, no. I think it's actually a really deft finish from Matty Aitken. The ball into the box from Kenley Billham's good, and Aitken's almost got his back to goal when he gets a toe on it, and I think it's just the way it's placed is inch perfect. Right across goal. I don't think even if you're diving at full stretch, you're going to get that. I probably don't like the way he moved for it. See, if he dived, it would have looked better, but he kind of looks like he thinks it's going by the post, and then he doesn't really dive, and that just makes it look worse. Yeah, the fact that he's kind of got his knees bent and he's kind of doing this sort of position with his arms. Yeah, I'll agree with that. It doesn't look very favourable. The second one, maybe he could have done better with it, but I'd argue that it's just incredibly well hit from Scott McGill. What I loved about this goal, see when the ball gets headed out to him, the way McGill controls it, he controls it with the studs, but it's the front of his boot, and so he kicks it down so it goes in front of him into his path and takes a wee bounce at the same time so he can get the laces right behind it. And McGill, I think he's got 2 goals this season. The other one was against Montrose, and that was an absolute rocket as well from outside the area. So he's got it. He's capable of doing that, Scott McGill. The only criticism I would have of him is that I think sometimes the games can pass him by. See, out with possession, he can sometimes be a wee bit flaky. And I think the Stenhousemuir are better when Michael Anderson's in the midfield alongside Finn Robson. And Finn Robson's been a bit of a revelation. I think that when he joined from Forfar Athletic, I certainly didn't expect much from him. I don't think that anyone else really expected much from him. But he's been excellent in the middle of the park. He's given you everything, like good at passing, good at breaking up play, good at driving with the ball. Him and Anderson have complemented each other really well.
And I suppose the player who I didn't think had a particularly good game was eventually hooked was Finlay Gray. Thought the game passed him by a wee bit. He was working hard as he always tends to do, Finlay Gray, but it just didn't quite come off for him, and he was rightly hooked for it. So a bad day for Stenhousemuir, but there's ways you can spin it. You could do it like what you were saying. You could basically actually repeat what you said for Ayr United for them, where it's 3 draws in a row, and you could maybe say, oh, that's a team that aren't able to win, or that they're struggling to break down opponents. But then you say Queen of the South, 93rd minute equaliser against them, and against Kelty Hearts, 2-0 down to score 2 goals in the 84th and 88th minute, one of which was a thunderbolt that the goalkeeper had no chance of saving despite the fact he got 2 hands on. I'd say Stenhousemuir mentality monsters, mate. That's what they are.
See if you've not seen, or obviously you said you've not seen the Stenhousemuir highlights, they've got a camera behind the goal for Scott McGill's equaliser.
Oh, brilliant.
However, it kind of looks like a CCTV camera. Like it's not like a GoPro. It's got a kind of, I don't know how to put it, like a kind of weird CD lighting to it.
Okay.
Where it kind of looks like you're watching it through a CCTV camera, but on a film. Mm-hmm. So you know when like in a film they cut to something and somebody's watching like, there's the bad guy in a CCTV camera. That's how it looks, rather than like a conventional one. I don't know what it was, or if it was just the floodlights were hitting it at a certain angle, or the kind of the brightness or whatever. I've never seen a camera with that kind of contrast on it.
Speaking of the highlights, did you watch Kelty's highlights at all?
No, I didn't.
Right.
Stenny's were quite extensive. I think they were about 14 minutes or so.
Wow, right, fair play. I'll actually need to give them a go. But I watched Kelty's highlights because they were only 6 minutes. They generally gave a fair representation of the game, that Kelty were the better side. Passed up some great chances, good goalkeeping, bad finishing. In Tam O'Ware's post-match interview, that he mentions about a foul in the build-up to Stenhousemuir's first goal from Matty Aitken. Now, do you remember that? I'm saying that?
No.
Right. Complains about
I can quickly go and look at it, but
no, you don't need to. You don't need to. But he explains about there's a foul on Joseph Teasdale in the build-up where he challenges for a ball and he's fouled in the final third, and it probably should have been a foul for Kelty Hearts. What happens from that foul? The match highlights play on double speed. So the ball goes out, it goes out, and then it goes back to normal speed. I think it's a throw-in, gets played to Kinley Billam, and then the ball crossed in for Matty Aitken to finish. Now, Tam O'Ware complains about that foul that wasn't given and says that it should have been stopped in the build-up to the goal. And I'm thinking, yeah, but that's like, there's so much happens from the foul to the ball actually hitting the back of the net. There must be a dozen of passes for the ball's worked forward. And it's not as if he was fouled and the ball was kicked up the park and Stenhousemuir scored from it. There was a lot to happen there. And Kelty just didn't defend it well.
And if the ball goes out of play after when you think you should have had a foul, well, you should be back in shape and reset. So it doesn't. Yeah, it feels very much like straw clutching at that stage. And I understand, if you are a fan and you feel like your team have been done, especially drawing a game in those circumstances, you maybe are going to start feeling aggrieved about things. But yeah, I mean, like, it's not like you say somebody's been decked on the halfway line, they've played one pass, Matty Aitken's gone clean through on goal and scored. Like, it's on you to react as a team, especially in that situation. It's on you to react.
You've got loads of time to react as well. You've got loads of time. Watch the highlights because they just speed on. And I'd watched the highlights first and wondered, I think somebody's made a mistake when they're editing it. Something's happened and they've not gone back and corrected it. But no, imagine Tam O'Ware leaning over the guy's shoulder. Stick that in. Make sure you stick that in. Make sure the people see exactly what happened there. I suppose it's for Kelty. This is a building block for them. This is the sort of result. They'll be disappointed with the result, but see the first 45 minutes, the aggression, I'm going to use that word again, the aggression, the how they went about their business, trying to bully Stenhousemuir off the ball. And Stenhousemuir are a team that don't easily get bullied. That, for me, is the standard that Kelty need to play with going forward. Because if you play like that, you can, at this division, just by being more aggressive than teams, just by putting yourself about and giving teams a hard time, you can win games by doing that. You can get the team up the park. You can get fouls by doing that. And that's if you can do that, then that gives you a good chance of not just pulling away from Cove Rangers, but reeling in Montrose in 8th place.
It's funny as well, because if you going into the game, if I said, would you take a draw with Kelty at home, you'd be like, no, that's a game we should be winning. And if you said to Kelty, would you take a draw at Oakville View, they'd probably say, yeah, that would be a decent result. That would give us something to build on. It's just purely because of the way it happened that both teams probably feel the wrong way round about the result to a degree.
I think so.
But it'll be interesting. I'm fascinated to see how the Michael Tidser dynamic works as assistant, and if he can get back fit and playing. If he can get back fit and playing, and they can get Kyle Gourley back in goals, they certainly should be capable of reeling in Montrose, if not a few others, I would think. And you think Rico Diak's only going to get better. Like, he should only get better with age, and I've quite liked what I've seen from him.
He should do. Those things are absolutely plausible. Tidser's the most interesting one, because when O'Ware's struggling, Michael Payton, Sean and I spoke about it in last week's podcast. I think it was quite pointed, his post-match interview after the Alloa game, about Payton moving on and Tidser coming in. I think O'Ware said he wanted someone in the dugout alongside him whose values aligned with his, sort of something along those lines. Fair enough. But Tidser, is a really popular manager at Kelty, a very, not successful, but you know what I mean, the team were doing well when he left. They were challenging for promotion into the Championship at that period. And since then, Charlie Mulgrew's, well, let's be honest, pretty disastrous appointment, and then O'Ware coming in to steady the ship. The ship hasn't quite been steadied since Tidser's been away. It kind of feels like daddy's home. And if things don't improve, you could easily see them switching around, just saying, listen, I'm going to manage the team and you can be my number two. I think the tricky thing for Kelty is that Tidser, because he moved from one SPFL club to the other, won't be able to play until January when he can be registered. Yep. So there's an interesting quirk there. But I think that's definitely one to keep an eye on as the season goes on. Just a weird year. When you laid out all those things that Michael Tidser had been involved in, and he'd been at Hamilton Academical as well, coaching, if you remember. So there's another thing that he's done since this year. There's about 5 things that he's done that are all pretty wacky. So, good stuff. And speaking of managers, I hope this isn't the moment where somebody takes a chance on Gary Naismith. That's actually a legitimate concern, is that Wraith Rovers quite fancy picking him up, because it's not outside the realms of possibility.
It's strange how overlooked he's been, and if it is just that, he had an iffy spell at Queen of the South however many years ago it was now, like a long time ago. From your point of view, great, but there must be an element that feels quite frustrated for him by that. It's not that you want him to leave, you obviously would hate to see him leave Stenhousemuir, but you think for everything he's done for this club, winning the first league title in your history, turning around the absolute train wreck he inherited from Stephen Swift and making Stenhousemuir really a bit of a model for part-time clubs. So you'd say at the moment, I mean, I know there's been issues off the park over the summer, but at the moment, in terms of clubs with stability on the park who are kind of bankers to have solid seasons, say Arbroath, Alloa, Steny, like they just feel like one of those clubs who are heading in the right direction. I mean, Wraith could do a lot worse. And I just wonder what the reaction from their fans would be, because how many fans would then go, oh, but last time he was in the Championship with Queen of the South and Lyndon Dykes and Stephen Dobbie up front, they almost got relegated. You're like, well, yeah, since then Lyndon Dykes has gone from being an Australian who was kind of maligned by Queen of the South fans to a Scotland international with about 30 odd caps who's, fired us to international tournaments. Like, a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then.
Yeah, and on top of that as well, I think that managers that make mistakes from their time and then learn from them so they don't happen again. That's ultimately what you want when you make mistakes. I'm sure if Naismith was to do things at Queen of the South again, he might do things differently than he did previously. I think Rhys McCabe would be an interesting pick for Wraith Rovers. But listen, we're not here to talk about them. We had our chance to talk about Wraith Rovers' managerial appointment. We chose not to take it. We're not going to infest our time about Stenhousemuir, lovely Stenhousemuir, by talking about Wraith Rovers. We will talk about what's coming up next. Kelty Hearts versus Queen of the South.
I can see Kelty getting a result here, whether that's a win or a draw. I can see them taking something based on what I saw from the highlights.
There's Queen of the South turning East Fife over, who are taking on Stenhousemuir live at 5 on BBC Alba. Queen of the South, they were 2 goals up within the first 8 minutes, I think, at the weekend there. They're a difficult side to pin down, Queen of the South as well. Very difficult to know what to expect from Grinning Pete's team. I
have no idea if they're any good or not, which is why I just look at that and I think maybe Kelty, now they've had a week to reflect on it, they can take a wee bit of heart. They're at home. Queen of the South, I mean, under Peter Murphy, historically struggled away from home. I think Kelty are capable of getting a result here.
And what about East Fife versus the Warriors?
For some reason, I can see there being goals in this one. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 2-2 again.
I think it'd be good to see the Warriors get a win. I thought that East 5, going by the highlights from that game against Queen's, defended abysmally for especially the first 2 goals. I mean, that was vintage Andy Munro for that first one. It's a shame because Munro's developed into a very capable centre-back, actually a pretty good part-time centre-back, but that was going back to the old days when he fancied himself to try and bring a bit of Italiano flair into the proceedings. Italian affairs class, just don't bring it into the Scottish lower leagues.
Not when you're playing centre-half for East Fife.
Not when you're playing... Of all the teams and all the positions to do it for, that is not it. But before we go into League 2, Fraser, there's been drama at Hamilton Academical. Bum bum. Sheriff Zingen, the owner, and Jerry Strain, the director of football, have been deemed to be not fit and proper by the Scottish FA, so they're effectively no longer allowed to be involved with the football club. And then the following day, it was revealed the police are investigating fraud at the Accies. The Force received a report on the 23rd of May this year and said, and I quote, information is being assessed and inquiries are ongoing. Now, the statement that was published on the Scottish FA website on Monday, I think it's fair to say it was excoriating, particularly in the direction of Jerry Strain. I think that Zingen just hadn't met his financial obligations in running the club, but Jerry Strain, there was 4 charges that were laid out against him. None of it made for particularly good reading, and none of it was a particular surprise either.
No, when I saw the strength of this statement, I let out a sort of audible noise at my desk. I was sitting at work, I was just reading through it, and I was like, oh. And I think it was the shock at how unfit and improper you must be to fail that test in Scottish football. And I say this from a position of experience because I know the people who have been involved in my own football club, and I am horrified by the prospect that Jerry Strain and Sheriff Zingen could be worse than them. It feels like a massive kick in the egos for both of them. In fact, Hamilton at the moment feel like a club that are being kind of strangled by egos. So Jerry Strain, everything he's posted on LinkedIn, although I see he's taken away his fit and proper person certification from his LinkedIn page now, so that's good. He is very on the ball with it. At least his admin is up to, his admin on his personal LinkedIn's up to scratch, not at Hamilton's side of things. He didn't come across as somebody who was in it for the right reasons. Sheriff Zingen didn't come across as someone who was in it for the right reasons. Attaching Jock Brown's name to statements just felt, when the statements were, at times spreading mistruths, just felt wrong, bizarre. I don't understand why he agreed to that. I don't understand why people thought that was a good idea to attach his name to it. And it feels like that is all combined to put Hamilton Accies right to the brink. When you add in the fact that, as far as I can see, every time I go on their thread, their various supporters groups are bickering as well. Come on, the club, I think there's a very realistic chance that Hamilton Accies don't exist at the end of this season. My God, get your act together, stop falling out over stupid things, try and get your football club back from these psychopaths, put egos to one side, get Hamilton back playing in Hamilton, and get a club, whatever level. I remember saying, and possibly to you or to Fowler, see if Dumbarton had to start again in the West of Scotland 4th Division, almost like Clydebank did, and work our way up. But we had our club back. That was fine with me. I was prepared to do that. I think Hamilton are in not a dissimilar position now. But Dumbarton's support was united. Clydebank's support was united.
Yeah.
Hamilton have a small support. And every time I go in the thread, and I don't know, because it's something that previous people involved with my club did, they tried to sort of turn people against each other within the club. I don't know if there's bad actors involved here who are maybe trying to turn people against it. I don't know enough about behind the scenes at Accies. But if fans can't put ego to one side and think, right, we're all Hamilton supporters, we might have different views on what the future should be, but fundamentally we want what's best for this club and we want this club to survive, get a grip.
That's God, you sound like Tom Miller at the end there. Mr.
Higgins.
Mr. Strain, get a grip of yourself, you idiot. If you could lip read our apologies. I can't really add to that. Yes, I think that, we use Pie and Bovril a lot when we're pulling together these podcasts. It just helps the general effort. You can watch highlights and clips in social media and so on, post-match interviews, but to really sort of aggregate and get an idea as to what the lie of the land is, it calls Pie and Bovril is very, very useful for it. And just that Hamilton thread, you go from one day to the next and there's about 6 pages of stuff of new posters that have just joined, posting for the first time. It's not great to read. It's difficult to try and wade through. So I think you're absolutely correct. One thing though, I was feeling a bit mischievous yesterday. I tweeted or retweeted that the Improving Scottish Football podcast tweet where it was the inside story of Hamilton Academical re-establishing the club's credibility, and this was an interview with Jerry Strain. While you were talking there, I went on to Twitter and just to see, because I was going to bring it up in reference to making a gag about it. The tweet's been deleted. The tweet has been deleted that's got that on it, and the video has been taken down from YouTube, so it no longer exists.
That's disappointing. It must be really gutting, to be fair, when you do something like that, you put it out to the world, you think, I'm quite pleased with this. I felt like that I'm obviously proud of my work because it's gone out to the wider world, and then it turns out that it's made you, it's harsh to say a laughing stock, but people would then quote it and laugh at you. That's unpleasant.
Just Jerry Stranger's looking for a willing rube, and that guy's like, I'll interview you. It's fine. Completely soft soaping, but there you go. You might have deleted it. You might have privated the video. We still remember that you did it, nevertheless.
A bit like Jerry Strain saying that he has a doctorate from Harvard or something, and then somebody dug into that and he attended a course that was like $1,500 and everyone got a certificate.
Oh man, that's like what you can order. You can become a minister like online for like
print it off and put it in like in The Simpsons.
Fraser, we will finish this podcast by going into League Two, and our third and final match took place in the capital, where Edinburgh City and Elgin City duked it out. A battle of the cities, a battle of black and white, and a battle the Highlanders would emerge from victorious. Although Jack Duncan put Edinburgh into an early lead, Elgin rallied in the second half. Dylan Ross drew them level with a free kick. Russell Dingwall went and put them in front, and then Oliver Quality put gloss on the scoreline with a third goal at the death. Edinburgh City 1, Elgin City 3. Now, the Citizens are still bottom of the table with 3 points. They're 9 points from Annan Athletic in ninth, but Elgin have climbed into the final promotion playoff place. They have 15 points. What did you make of this one?
It's the first time, and I thought this after seeing the result, and then I thought this after watching the highlights, it's the first time I've actually thought maybe that 15-point deduction will get Edinburgh City. Not because I don't rate them as a team, because I do, and they weren't very good in this. They obviously had an off day, and I think there was no qualms that Elgin were by far, in a way, the better side. But you look at how tight the division is, and you think they're still 9 points from safety. Mm-hmm. There's basically everyone is, so Dumbarton on Saturday were 9th at the start of play, 5th at the end of it. I think at one point we were up to 4th as well. Mm-hmm. So there's so much that's going on above it. All the teams are taking points off each other, but they're also all kind of keeping a consistent level of points. Nobody looks like, and the one I'm thinking of is Berwick Rangers when Albion Rovers had that woeful team assembled of junior players.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, right, if Albion Rovers can get their act together, they'll catch Berwick. Edinburgh don't need to get their act together per se, but they need some team to start dropping away, because 9 points, 10 points is a lot to be clawing back. And come the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if there was 15 points between, say, 4th and 10th place in the league. And that could honestly be the difference for Edinburgh City. Michael McIndoe can and has worked absolute miracles. And I think on paper, their starting lineup is still pretty good. If you it takes nothing away from Jack Duncan up front, who's doing really well for himself, but they've spent the whole season without a striker. He is a centre half. He actually looks pretty capable as a striker, but they've spent the whole season really without an established striker, because Tui Daramolo obviously got injured, and then Jaden Ferguson, who is back on this, looks like he's short of match sharpness, if indeed he's going to be capable of scoring goals in this division. This is the first time that I've looked at them and thought, I maybe worry for you a wee bit, and I maybe worry particularly on the squad depth front, because if Jason Jarvis gets injured, if Robbie Mann gets injured, if Innes Lawson gets injured, and he went off I think 55 minutes or so in this game, and they basically lost the run on themselves after that, they have nobody who can replace them, and they're not going to be able to go out in January and sign players who can replace players of that quality.
Yes, that's broadly what my thoughts were on this as well. When I saw them go ahead, I thought, brilliant, that looks good. It looked like a pretty good first half performance as well. I think a lot of the chances they were creating came from like dribbles through the middle of the park. I think that's something that Edinburgh City are abundant with. I think they might be the dribbliest side in that division. You think of the guys that are all really good, like Malik Zaid, probably the best dribbler in that division. Robbie Mann, very capable at carrying the ball. And then you got someone like Innes Lawson, bad touch, maybe could have set himself up with a really nice goal scoring chance when he burst through, just a really bad touch that was well saved. And then like something that Jason Stokes is pretty capable of that as well. Second half looked like an absolute disaster. I mean, it didn't help that Mark Weir had an off day. And I think it's something that Kirk Crichton was keen to point out. I think that anyone associated with Edinburgh City be keen to point out that Mark Weir has saved Edinburgh City far more times than he's let them down. But the first and second goals were really bad. And I think that, judging by the stuff that Ali Moncrief put on Pie and Bovril, to mention that again, it just sounded like with the changes that he made, it sounded like McIndoe was maybe overthinking things a wee bit, trying to maybe a wee bit too smart, and bringing in young boys and putting them into unfamiliar positions just in the chance it might spark something, and it didn't. And I think it was quite comfortable for Elgin at the end.
I think the big worrying thing is, did he make those changes to try and spark something at home? Because that's him now winless in 6 home games, like winless in all the home games this season. And you look at it and think, I think Edinburgh, not in terms of quality or strength and depth or anything like that, but in terms of just being a team unit, or the best team unit that I've seen Dumbarton play this season. Like, defend as a team, attack as a team, manage the game superbly against us. I mean, we basically laid siege to them in the second half, but struggled to, because of how well they were set up at defending their box, winning fouls, taking the pressure off, hitting on the break. And then I looked at the league table and I couldn't believe that they haven't won a game at home. And that becomes a mental thing as much as anything. Because, I mean, I spoke to Adam Livingston about it a couple of weeks ago, because Dumbarton, their home form has been pretty poor. The win at the weekend was our first home win since the opening day of the season. And he said it does get into players' heads that they, you'll turn up, see if you're on a great run at home, you turn up and you're like, right, we're not going to lose this. You turn up and you think, if we go behind, the fans are going to start getting frustrated, or you just don't enjoy playing at home. And I wonder how much the geography of Meadowbank is playing into that. Like, do they maybe just not enjoy playing at home because there's a limited atmosphere? It's a pretty miserable, dispiriting place to play your football, and then they go away from home, and their form away from home is magnificent, like five wins in 6 away from home, I think it is. Like, they just go away from home, there's a bit of a crowd there, there's people behind them, people on their backs, that builds into siege mentality they've got, and they love it. But if they're going to stay up with a 15-point deduction, they need to be winning games at home, and they need to be winning games at home from now until the end of the season.
How do you explain something like that? It's not as if that we're travelling in this country particularly long distances, or certainly not on a regular basis. It's quite a central based division. A lot of teams at Edinburgh will be playing, you're travelling maybe 45 minutes an hour from ground to ground to get to. I don't know how you can explain that anyone's having like really bad away from home or really bad at home. I just something I can't get my head around. It's not like you're playing it like Galatasaray away at home, but if you know what I mean, it just I can't understand. The park, it's a synthetic park, broadly similar to a lot of the pitches in the division, and I don't know. It's I think you made a good point there that the siege mentality that McIndoe's fostered with that points deduction, and remember how great it looked after they beat Stranraer. You see wagon wheel and that becoming its own thing. Just think that it's now time to eat the wagon wheel, or don't roll the wagon wheel anymore, and just concentrate on getting points on the board. I mean, they've got Annan Athletic at the weekend, and I know there's other teams that are quite close to them, but if you don't beat Annan and results elsewhere go against you, you could be back to 12 points behind. And that becomes like a psychological thing where for a long time I've said that I'd fancy Edinburgh to actually finish in the top 4. Still think they're capable of doing that. I do still think that, but need to see something to back that up.
Yeah, I've been saying to anyone who'll listen for weeks that I think Edinburgh would still finish in the top 4. And then when I saw that result, it was almost like a really harsh dose of reality. So I base Edinburgh on what I see, or what I saw when they played us a couple of weeks ago, and what I see on social media, which is like, and Aaron Fraser, who's a great guy, does a brilliant job with their social media, actually helped us out at the University of Stirling as well with some pictures from the Scottish Cup tie, so thank you for that. Like, what I see from social media is like such a united team, something that's going in the right direction, all the vibes are positive. And then I actually just sat and looked at the league table, looked at the home form, looked at the away form, what's Edinburgh's, what do they need to do now to stay up and to get into that top 4? And that was when it hit me, like, this is going to be a really big ask. Yeah. And then you look at their squad, and I think they had 4 substitutes at the weekend, or 3 or 4 substitutes, predominantly all young guys.
3 in the goal, 3 plus a goalkeeper.
Yeah, so Jayden Ferguson, as a senior player, albeit one who's kind of unproven in the SPFL, plus would it be Logan Miles, Callum Brodie and Enzo Marinovic, who are all young. I mean, Marinovic being a goalkeeper and then the other 2 being 17, 18 years old. And you start to think, if this was any other club, especially with my own team, looking to avoid the drop this season, if that was Annan's squad, if that was Stirling Albion's squad, Stranraer's squad, I'd look at that and be like, right, we can finish ahead of this mob. They don't win games at home. They've got basically a tiny squad, tiny untested or like really, really untested players on the bench. There are one or two major injuries or even just players getting burnt out away from disaster. And that's maybe the first time I felt that about them.
I suppose though this is when the manager has to step. I mean, I'm saying has to step up. It's not like he's been stepping up the moment that he walked through the door. That's the thing, that he is the glue. Him and Kirk Crichton, they are the glue that are holding all this together. And see, you're right in what you're saying. Had it been another team, I think Edinburgh's just not another team though, because of Michael Mackindo, because of this sorcery that he has and his just relentless positivity and enthusiasm. And that's why I think that training this week, they'll be absolutely flying this week. I think they're absolutely buzzing. I bet they can't wait to get down to Gallowbank and play. I bet they cannot wait for it. And if it was, I think that's I'm going to use the term aura. I think that's the aura that he's built around himself. That say it was Stevie Farrell, for instance, in this position, I would have resigned myself that Edinburgh be finishing bottom of the table under him. But it's not Stevie Farrell, it's Michael Mackindo. That's why I believe they can finish as high up the table as they possibly can. It's crazy that I think any other team had a points deduction in that situation. I would think that's them finished. But it's not just because it's Mackindo. And
it's almost because it is Michael Mackindo, we almost take it for granted. So if they stay up this season with a 15-point deduction, the lowest budget in the SPFL, if they finish 9th this season, that's a brilliant achievement. Yeah. But we would probably be like, 9th, yeah, I actually thought they could get top 4. And that's almost unfair on Michael Mackindo because of the job that he's doing there. It's incredible. And the fact, like you say, the fact that we're talking about them probably for the first time, like, they might be in a spot of bother after a 15-point deduction with the lowest budget in the league. Like, that shows the job he's done and the job he's doing there. I still believe that they'll stay up, and I think they'll go to Annan and I think they'll win this weekend because A, it's away from home, B, I think they're a better team, and C, Annan were very, very poor at the weekend, and I feel like Edinburgh will be in a good position to kind of prey on that. They'll have done their homework on Annan, I've no doubt. I think they'll be the sort of team that will cause Annan problems.
Yeah, and on top of that as well, we mentioned the mistakes that Mark Weir made. These mistakes are rare. It's weird for it to happen once in a game for Weir. It's especially weird for it to happen twice. I mean, the free kick, the first goal from Dylan Ross, it's well struck. And watching the highlights, how far out that ball is, I was like, wow, that's a really good hit to get it. Hit it with as powerfully and as accurately as that, but it's still low enough for him to dive across and save it. I mean, he should save it. I mean, this is something that even Kirk Crichton acknowledges in his post-match interview, that it's a save that he should have made. The third one is a misfortune for that. He comes out to claim the ball, tries to juggle it, and I think it's just like, unfortunately for him, Oliver Quality is just in the place just to dod it away from him. And then the defence, it's one of those ones where when you see your goalkeeper coming out to get that, you're thinking, all right, there's Big Mark, got it, that's fine. And I don't know if you must switch off a wee bit or you stop concentrating, but then all of a sudden, he's not got it, and then it gets past to Dingwall and he's got a finish into the empty net. So those are two things that don't happen. You don't know. Say Mark Weir saves that free kick. Who knows? Elgin City win 5-1. I don't know. I
was going to say, you can almost see, I feel, when I watched it, I thought, right, okay, we can almost write that down as being, your keeper's made a couple of bad mistakes, it's a bad day at the office, and it's very out of character for him. Right up until I saw they hadn't won a home game. And then I thought, all right, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe there is something a wee bit deeper going on than that, but it is out of character. And like you say, because of how good Mark Weir's been, seemingly Edinburgh defenders see him coming out for a ball, they do probably think, right, that's it, he's got it, I now need to get into position to make my run for where he's going to stick the ball next. He's almost, if he was more jittery, they maybe could have bailed him out. But because he's been so solid for them,
that's a good point.
He's caused his own problems by being competent.
What about Elgin City though? As you mentioned, they are up into 4th place. They're in a good wee run of form at the moment. 4 consecutive wins in all competitions. Pretty convincing win in the Challenge Cup on Tuesday night as well. I think they've bounced back very nicely from that shellacking they took off East Kilbride a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I've been really impressed by how they've responded to that, because when that result happened, after that, I was expecting a lot from Elgin this season. I was expecting them to be challenging for the top 4 and capable of getting there. The way they started the season, I was like, oh, actually, maybe I've very much overestimated them. Maybe it's not going to happen. It's going to be a underwhelming season for them, for a club who have got like 7 strikers on the books and just don't seem to be winning games. Then they put together that run of form just in time for Dumbarton going up to Borough Briggs. Thanks for that, lads. Much appreciated. I was impressed by them in this. I thought that they obviously deserved the win, like we touched on. It's not just the fact that, they got fortunate in terms of the chances Edinburgh created, but to a degree, they had to put the pressure on to get it. And Edinburgh aren't a team who historically, or certainly this season, have given up a huge number of chances to teams. So although they maybe have made mistakes, to put 3 past Edinburgh City at Meadowbank is something you wouldn't fancy many teams to do. Like it's still an excellent result, and it was certainly the most eye-catching result I think in the division for me, because it now means that Elgin will have that, by being top of that really compressed group between 4th and 9th, they've now got a chance, if they win at the weekend, to start edging towards Clyde, going, right, the rest of you can get involved in that daft battle between 5th place and 10th place, and we'll just start to eke our way into the playoffs and try and cement it, because I think the league is crying out for somebody, or certainly somebody in that group, probably between Clyde and Annan, somebody to put together a run of form like this, like a run of 4, 5, 6 games where they may be winning 5, drawing 1, something like that, just to eke away from any danger, because it's not going to be this tight, or it could be, to be fair, but it's unlikely to be this tight for the whole season. And I wonder if Elgin are now in a good position to do that, because on paper I think they've got a good squad.
Certainly, I'll be honest and say it's a team that I haven't been paying as much attention to, because I think this might be the first or second time we've spoken about them on this podcast, and it's only when you actually take the deep dive into them, when when we do these podcasts, you try to talk about a different team every week, despite the fact we've talked about Kelty Hearts last week. But that's sometimes anomalies like this happen. Sometimes it throws up things like this. But Elgin City aren't a team that I've been keeping an eye on. And just taking a look at the results and through the team there, and you'll be a better place to speak about than me. That quip that you made about them having dozens of strikers on their books, you weren't joking. When they were able to bring off like Josh O'Connor, Oliver Quality and Kane Hester all off the bench, you would think under different circumstances that these guys would all be starting for different clubs. Yeah,
and they've scored a reasonable number of goals, but not an explosive number of goals, but they're relatively competent at the back. They're just, maybe something just hasn't clicked so far this season. I was impressed by them. We played them on, I think, the 3rd or 4th, I think it was the 3rd game of the season, 4th game of the season. We played them at home, drew 1-1, and to be honest, we only drew 1-1 because Shea Kelly had pulled off heroics throughout that game, including a free kick and just about the last touch of the ball. And I remember saying to Mikey, who is Elgin's media guy, saying to him afterwards, I feel like we very much stole a point there. And I think at that point, they were winless in the league. I can't remember if they'd lost all their games. They'd certainly taken a doing or two off East Kilbride, I'm sure. And he was just like, that's just the way it's going for us. Like, we are actually playing all right. We're just not taking chances. Now we're maybe starting to see a wee bit better. And, players maybe grown into position as well. Dylan Ross obviously got the free kick. Decent free kick. Mark Weir probably should have saved it, but he is starting to look like a bit of a standout. Like somebody who is
17 as well.
Yeah, one of these players who you get on loan and you think, right, 8 out of 10 loan players are probably somewhere between, they're fine, they're all right, they're never going to make it at their parent club. You look at him and think he's maybe somebody who does have a chance of making it because of being as effective as he has been at 17.
I think that's a very fair thing to say. I mean, you're taking them on at the weekend there. You're going to be, I presume you'll be travelling up to Borough Briggs for it. I always think that it goes into what we were saying maybe about Ross County earlier, where if you are a team, or we said like a lot of the clubs in the SPFL, it is quite central based, maybe about a third of the clubs elsewhere. But I think if you are one of the most hard to get to grounds in the country, and I think you'd probably include Elgin City in this, given the fact you've got to travel up to Inverness and then go like half an hour, 45 minutes to the east to get there. You have to make Elgin a really difficult place to go a place where people don't like playing. Do you think that's something that Elgin have done? I mean, I think they've, just checking their stats, certainly they didn't do too well in the league, but they think they've only lost twice in the league.
I think there's 3-3, 3 wins, 3 defeats at home. So I do think there might be an element where, certainly a few years ago it was true, that Elgin, because Elgin fundamentally didn't win games away from home, they went almost a year without winning a game away from home, that Borough-Briggs was a notoriously tough place to go. This season I think it's been easier, but it feels like it's maybe not as much of a fortress as it feels like it could be, given the nature of the journey that teams are facing going up there. I mean, I would be going up anyway because Borough-Briggs is one of my favourite grounds, and I see, even if it's great when you get the result, right? See, when you get the result, there's nothing better. I just get a bit of an achievement from I'm one of the 50 or 60 Dumbarton fans or whatever it is that's made that journey, that's, given up a whole day. I mean, we're making a weekend of it, staying up in Elgin over the weekend. It's just an experience as much as anything. You go for the football, but you're like, right, well, it's a change of scenery. It's, an excuse to go away for the weekend. I've also only ever seen us lose once there, I think.
Okay.
So my memories of Borough-Briggs are predominantly quite positive. Now, that could obviously change this weekend and it could be absolutely dismal. However, I'm going up there with hope on the basis that it's not a fortress for them and that I have quite a good record. And the last time I went to Borough-Briggs in November, we won 4-0 and Aaron Linus scored an absolute screamer. So a repeat of that would do me.
He's still kicking a ball for Dumbarton.
Aaron Linus, yes, SPFL Team of the Week and Man of the Match at the weekend.
Fucking hell, man! That just shows how much I've been paying attention to that. See, Fraser. Once your team gets promoted into League One, and you become established there, you pay less attention to what's going around to the sides below. That's really bad on my part. It's Aaron Linus. He's still kicking
if it makes you feel better, that was his first league start at home of the season.
No, it doesn't make me feel any better. It makes me feel worse, if anything, because I should have known that. This is what our listeners expect, and I have failed to deliver, and you have had to wipe my backside for me. Metaphorically, of course, and I don't like it. I should be able to take care of business myself. But we mentioned there the two games. So Annan versus Edinburgh City. How do you see that one going? Away win?
Yeah, I think Edinburgh will win. Annan were... I don't know how much of it Dumbarton were good. It was our best home performance of the season, but Annan looked pretty poor, and we're probably quite thankful to Clarke, who turned in a really good performance, that they only got beaten 2-1. So I think Edinburgh will win that. Again,
another hard team to pin down. They go through periods where you think, Christ, Willie Gibson really looks like he's getting his act together with this team, and then you think, my goodness, why is Willie Gibson still in charge of this team? But that's, something, I suppose that's why teams are in this big glob of sides in the middle of the table, because no one out that from 4th to 9th can really quite get their act together just yet. And Elgin City versus Dumbarton, I'm going to go for a home win for this one, Fraser.
I think Dumbarton will win 4-0 and Aaron Linus will score. And if that comes off, please crop this, put it over the highlights, Sean Elderbrandt and Craig Fowler, and pay me big money as a Nostradamus.
Well, I won't be there to see it, because I will have killed myself if that comes to pass, because I don't want to be in a world where Aaron Linus is scoring 4 goals up at Borough-Briggs. I don't want to be where Aaron Linus is playing football for Dumbarton Football Club at all. I take that one back, but I will kill myself if he does score at the weekend. Anyway, Fraser, that will do us for the time being. If you liked what you've heard from myself and Fraser, please subscribe to the Terrace's Patreon channel, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. There is hours of content available, and you can lock it all for as little, lock some of it for as little as £2 per month. Absolutely buttons for some genuinely brilliant stuff. There's podcasts that have been going up this week where Craig Fowler's been interviewing fans of SPFL clubs about their sides. So you're getting real deep dives into clubs up and down the country. So very much worth listening to. Fraser, thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me on.
And to you, the listener, thank you very much. Enjoy your football, but unlike Mick Kennedy calling out Alan Maybury for his comments in a fairly ordinary post-match interview following East Kilbride's 2-0 win over Stirling Albion, please do so respectfully. I thought you were going to come in and say something about that.
No, I had nothing to add. It was a beautiful sign-off, and I will just sit in silence.
Thank you.